An Evening in Japanese Lacquer. It was early evening, and already I had decided I wouldn't speak much. That sort of silence that settles on a man not from mood exactly, but from a kind of internal hush, like the hush of a great cathedral before vespers. There was no particular reason for this quiet, except perhaps that I'd spent the better part of the day wandering through the detritus of my own thoughts, and I wanted to end it somewhere simple and luminous. That is how I came to find myself, alone, dining at a Japanese restaurant on the edge of the city. A sleek, darkened sprawl of lacquered wood, incense warmth, and lantern-lit corners. It was a large place, far larger than the slit-thin facade would have suggested, the kind of architectural deceit that I have always admired. You step through the narrow entryway, and suddenly the ceiling rose above you like a theater stage, flanked by two bars, one softly backlit and murmurous, the cocktail bar, and the other brightly gleaming and surgical, the sushi bar. I chose the latter, not out of hunger for fish exactly, but for the line of sight it offered. From my perch, I could see across the floor to the cocktail bar, where amber light caught on the shoulders of women, and men leaned in, with practiced intent, their drinks gleaming like citrine in the dusk. The sushi chefs, a battalion of 10 in crisp white jackets, moved with the staccato grace of dancers mid-rehearsal. There was something almost devotional in their concentration, knives glinting in rhythm, seaweed snapping against rice, their fingers nimble and silent. Behind them, the open kitchen flickered like a shrine of heat and steam. To my left, the hostess stand stood like a pair of bookends marking the beginning and end of each guest's little narrative. The two women stationed there could have been models from some lost Hiroshige print, updated for this century. One, a slight and willowy girl of Asian descent, moved with a lightness so gentle I feared she might disappear altogether if she stood too still. The other, slightly taller, with warm olive skin and almond-shaped eyes, exuded the kind of casual elegance one only learns from being looked at often. They spoke to each arriving party with smiles that managed to be both intimate and practiced, as if this whole endeavor, this theater of plates and pleasantries, were theirs alone to orchestrate. I ordered hot sake, which came quickly, poured from a pale ceramic flask into a matching cup that fit in my palm like a warm secret. My waitress was efficient, cheerful without artifice, and gave the impression of one who'd long ago figured out how to care without entanglement. "For you tonight?" she asked, pen at the ready. "The bibimbap, please." "Short rib," I said, savoring the weight of the words. They felt foreign and beautiful, like names of cities I'd never visited. She nodded and disappeared. The room was full now, tables set with single low-glow lamps that looked like captured fireflies, casting enough light for intimacy, but not quite enough for confession. The voices around me hummed like a sea of polite bees. A man in a blue linen blazer was laughing too loudly. A woman in gold earrings kept staring at her phone, untouched martini at her elbow. The decor was rich in the way that makes you feel poorer for having been there. Swords hung behind glass panels, their curves arresting as if mid-slash. Painted scrolls depicted mountain landscapes so delicate they seemed to tremble in the ambient breeze from the AC. There were ceramic cats with one paw raised, wooden screens lacquered into gloss, bonsai trees poised in their eternal paws. Every object was exactly where it was meant to be. Nothing accidental, everything curated. Even the music was a sort of suggestion more than a sound. Minimalist piano strokes dissolving into the air like salt into miso. My food arrived in a black stone bowl, so hot I could hear it sizzle. The short rib was glossy and dark, collapsed into a richness only time can coax from meat. The poached eggs stared up at me like a single unblinking eye, nestled among bright shreds of carrot, spinach, mushrooms, and the ruby pulse of gochujang. I stirred it slowly, ceremonially, watching the yolk melt into gold threads that wrapped themselves around the rice like a benediction. I drank all the sake, which seemed to unlock something lonely and luminous in me, and by the time I reached halfway through the bibimbap, I knew I would never finish it. It was too much. Too warm, too full, too generous. Like a love letter you open years after it was meant to be read. Still, I lingered. I watched the cocktail bar and the mirrored bottles lining its shelves. I watched the white jackets move like gulls behind a storm. I watched the flicker of lamps across the room and imagined I was a part of something unfolding. even if only as a distant observer. Eventually, I signaled for the check. My waitress brought it with the same quiet efficiency she had maintained all evening, and I thanked her as if I were leaving a friend's home. I stood slowly, letting the heat of the sake and the weight of the meal settle somewhere between my ribs. As I approached the exit, the taller of the two hostesses looked up and caught my eye. For the first time that evening, her smile seemed entirely unperformed. It was small, but sincere. The kind of smile that reminds you the world is full of stories still unwritten, and that perhaps, just perhaps, you might still be one of them. Outside, the city was still exhaling the last breath of sunlight. The sky had gone the color of bruised lilac, and the warm air brushed against my face like a lover's palm. It was Saturday night, and the streets were beginning to stir with that particular energy. Couples drifting toward rooftop bars, groups of friends thick with laughter, cars inching toward the pulse of some invitation I would not be accepting. I walked to my car slowly, not out of reluctance, but to better hold on to the moment, the meal, the smile, the quietness inside me that the evening had left undisturbed. Back home, the apartment smelled faintly of the orange blossom candle I'd lit that morning and forgotten. I went to the cabinet and found the bottle of scotch CC had brought me from Scotland. Deep amber, aged enough to remember things you'd rather forget. I poured a glass, neat, and sat by the open window. The city outside murmured faintly. Inside, all was still. I was melancholy, yes, but not unhappy.